So Yassine had posted an item about Volkswagen introducing a new AI capability in their car. Well, it's probably machine learning, not AI, where it could detect an incapacitated driver. It detects when you are incapacitated, by most likely by some sort of medical episode or whatever the case may be, and slows you down, and then brings you to the side, brings you to a safe stop. Now, I love when people post on the Discord. I completely encourage that. I love the community helping the community. But I took a particular interest in this because I've always been fascinated by machine learning in cars. And if you've watched my content before, then you know that I'm not I'm very bearish. I'm very down on the capabilities of machine learning in cars. I think that we have to accept that there are some problems out there that machine learning can't solve, and I think that driving, a fully self-driving car may be one of them. This one caught my eye because what's the old saying? Consider the source, right? Consider the source. And in this case, it was Volkswagen. And let's be honest, when it comes to technology, when it comes to AI, machine learning, all companies out there want to seem edgy. They want to seem cutting edge. And in addition to that, you got to consider Volkswagen's reputation. If you haven't seen it, on Netflix, there is a fascinating documentary on Volkswagen and the problems that they had with emission laws, particularly in California, but emission laws across the United States with their engines. And I believe I want to say it was specific to their diesel engines, if I remember right, or it might have been all of their engines. Okay. And if you've watched that documentary, a couple of fascinating things happened in that. One is, I think it's a great documentary because it celebrates students. I don't know if you know this, but that entire scandal that Volkswagen caused for multiple years here in the US was discovered by a couple of students. It was a couple of students that were doing their master's program. They were trying to find a cheaper device, or trying to create a cheaper device for emissions testing. Because when you do emissions testings on cars, it requires a garage and this big machine and a trained technician. And they said, no, we can do better than that. We want to have a single small box that does emissions testing. And they're the ones that found that the Volkswagen results that they were posting were wrong. A couple of students, and I believe it was the University of Mississippi, figured out that Volkswagen was faking their results. So to me, that says a lot about the company. And it also says about, how little they thought about the emissions testing process, that they could fake it that quickly. So you got to consider the source when it comes to Volkswagen. But you want to know even the worst thing? The worst thing is that these graduate students obviously went on to write a paper and to publish these results. And Volkswagen, got a lot of bad press out of it, so on and so forth. And by the way, in this first instance, they were basically faking the paperwork, right? Because car makers can self-report their emission results, okay? So the students went on to write the paper, got a lot of publicity. Volkswagen got a lot of negative PR. And then obviously this affected all the states in the US. But I believe California is the one that decided to prosecute them because California has the strictest laws. So they were breaking every law in the US, but they were breaking it the most in California, right? They were most over the limits If you were to look at the state limits, they were most over the limits in California. Okay? So California went on to prosecute them and say, hey, you're faking your results. We want to put you through our own tests. And Volkswagen said, okay, sure. And then do you know what Volkswagen did? Volkswagen figured out that the California tests were based on simulating driving. And the way they simulated driving was that the California tests would detect whether the steering wheel was moving or not. And Volkswagen knew they were under investigation. They knew that they were running these tests for California. They knew this, and they faked the steering wheel movement for those tests when they were already under prosecution. California was using those tests to continue the prosecution. And Volkswagen knew all of this, and they faked the steering wheel movement in order to again fake the tests that were specifically being run and managed and, completely, completely being run by California. So Volkswagen gamed the system not once, but twice. And the second time, they knew they were under prosecution. You guys believe that? Ridiculous. Sounds a lot. So I'm just saying, we can look at their AI and we can be like all fascinated by it. But consider the source. Consider the source. All right? I'm just saying. I can only give you guys the information. You can go out on Netflix. You can find a documentary. Netflix did a whole series on like these corporate scandals. And I believe that was like their very first episode because it's such an outlandish story. To me, it's fascinating that it doesn't get more attention. But they knew their engines were bad. They knew they were violating emission laws. And then they knew that they were being prosecuted by California. And they still faked the test. So don't be so impressed by their AI. Be careful with that. Be careful with that. We should be careful of all companies' AIs, right? But Volkswagen? Do you really want to trust them? I'm just saying.